Okay, I believe I'm recording. So cool. Hello, Junior English. I hope you guys are doing well. Long time no see. But today, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about bias, what it is. Actually, let me share my screen here and I'll tell you guys what the agenda is because I made a little presentation. We don't need that. Here we go. All right. So I did a little meme because I miss doing those. I remember some of you would say, like, I really like your memes. So I'm like, I'll start today with a meme. But it's Tuesday, which is pretty cool. Tomorrow we're halfway there through the week, so we're doing good some way. And I thought the camel and the little, I think it's a little boy. I don't know. Anyways, I thought it was just super cute. Okay. So today we are going to talk about what bias is, the 6 types of bias. I'm going to walk you through a bias example after talking about the different types, just so you can visually see how this works all together. And then your task for today is you will answer a question posed under classwork in Google Classroom. And this is, why is understanding bias important when reading news articles or other media outlets like commercials or social media posts? So after you watch my presentation, go ahead and head on over to that question and type up your answer, and you will have everything done for today. Like always, if you want to get this done now, you totally can, but it is due Sunday, April 12th by 11:59 p.m. I did not even realize this because I just don't really pay attention to the days anymore, but the 12th is Easter Sunday. If you guys have plans on the 12th and you cannot get like all your work done to me till like the following, like the 13th and 14th, that's totally fine, because I didn't even realize that it is technically spring break this weekend. But if you are bored and just want to get everything done, that's fine. But if you do have plans, like just, spending time with your family, I also understand. I'm not going to count you off for being late when turning in that work. But anyways, let's head into what bias is. So I read a few of your guys' answers on Google Classroom for those that have already posted, and you all were right on the money. Bias is, the formal definition is prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. So basically, you are favoring one side over another, but you're not even looking at that other side that you're not favoring. Like, you're favoring one side in a very unfair way and putting them more up on a pedestal than the other. And so when thinking about bias, it brings about this idea of perspective, such as how you see something versus how someone else sees that same thing. So there may be some differing views with that, especially if someone does have a bias towards one thing that you do not. So you guys may have differing views and perspectives with that. And so that's what I kind of mean by that second bullet with your own belief system. Like, your own belief system may shift your perspective and how you view things, and also what you favor versus what you may dislike. But when thinking about bias, kind of think about a seesaw, or if you call it a teeter-totter. But it's like, when there is something, like when there is a bias source, usually that source is putting one thing, so they're on that high slope of the teeter-totter, like right here, rather than on the bottom here. Like, this bottom part would be the thing that they are giving no credit to, and basically putting the side that they do favor so high up that it's obvious that, this is the side that they favor, and they're not even paying attention to this side at all. And they usually shift it in such a way that it is very unfair and does not look at both sides equally. Because if they did look at both sides equally, you'd be balanced on the teeter-totter, right? Like, both sides would be on the same level. So with that in mind, when thinking about perspective, something that does help with all of this, and I think, yes, I can annotate on here, So when thinking about how people view different things, like think of maybe an optical illusion. So this picture right here, like just look at it for a few seconds. Okay, so one person may see one thing while the other doesn't. So in this picture, let me see if I can draw. Yes, I can. All right, so some people may see the mermaid. So let me go ahead and outline the mermaid for those of you that may not see it. This is gonna be rough. I mean, mermaid, merman. I'm not for sure if this is a merman. It might be a merman. This is kind of fun. Okay, we're almost there. Ooh, that was rough. See, like this is his arm or his or her arm. There's the other arm here, like more of the chest area. And then the face. And then this would be their hair, long voluptuous hair. And then there's a little fish right here. So some of you, when you were looking at the picture, saw the mermaid, merman right away. On the other hand, some of you may have may have, when you stared at this picture, you saw the face of an old man. So for those of you that saw the face of an old man, I just outlined the eyes. Here you have the old man's mustache. Kind of looks like Theodore Roosevelt without the glasses. His lips, and then here's his chin area. And his cheeks here. Oh, I'm getting a little sloppy, sorry guys. And then nose. Very sharp nose. And then other cheek. And then I guess this could be like his bangs. Like his hair, like the merman's hair will count as his hair too. Okay, some of you might have seen the man's face at first rather than the mermaid, merman. However, other people may have seen both of them at the same time, because sometimes when you stare at these long enough, you see both of them, and it's kind of creepy. But it's that whole idea of perspective. Sometimes people only see one side of something. So, for example, that could be if you only saw the merman, or you only saw the face of the man first. And then others have that kind of middle ground where they can see both things at the same time. They evaluate both sides of a situation, versus when you're thinking about bias and a media outlet, they're those people that only see one thing. So they either see the man's face or they see the mermaid, merman. Like they don't see both at the same time. They're not evaluating both of those sides. Okay, let me clear this real quick. So with that in mind, okay, cool. Let me X out of here. And let's go ahead and talk about the 6 types of media bias. All right, cool. So we have a couple pictures here. Some of the big news outlets that often side over one another, especially with political standpoints. So you have Fox News, which is very left side, very Republican. CNN is on that opposite side. They are more right-sided and more democratic in their views. And then you have MSNBC right in the middle there, where they kind of see both sides of a situation. And I will show you an example of that with the news article. I chose to kind of make this a little more clear, and we'll also discuss this more during the week, probably tomorrow and Thursday, about Fox News and CNN. But one of the types of bias is bias by omission. So this is leaving one side out of an article or series of articles over a period of time. So they are completely not even looking at the other side of a situation. So when thinking about politics, this could maybe be like there's only like a Republican point of view rather than looking at like the political situation as a whole, like Republican views, Democratic views at the same time. They're only looking at one of those sides during an article. And so this can happen with one story, or you could see this in a series of stories as a news outlet reports one set of events rather than the other. And so when thinking about this, you should be aware of liberal and conservative perspectives on current events. So that way, when you are reading an article like this, you know what conservatives view this event as, and you also know what the liberals like think of this event and like their views and what they support to see, okay, is this article including both, or are they just including one side? The other type is selection of sources. So this is where you hone in on what sources a news article is using and what they are incorporating. So in this type of bias, so if you're looking at a news article, it includes more sources that support one view over another. So they use more sources that support conservative views rather than liberal views, could be an example of that. So this can be found when reporters use such phrases as experts believe, or observers say, or most people believe. So when evaluating an article's sources, look for equal representation of both sides to find this type of bias, rather than if you see that the sources really favor one side over another, this is a selection of sources bias. Story selection bias. So this is basically a pattern of highlighting news stories that agree with the agenda of the left or right and ignoring the other side. So again, when you are looking at story selection, I could see this happening when, say if this like during election time, like a news article is going to include more positive stories that Republicans or conservatives have done within the government, and not really include also the good thing liberals have done with the government. So they're selecting stories that really favor and highlight one side rather than the other. Placement bias. So story placement is a measure of how important the editor considers a story. Many people only read the headlines and therefore only see the larger stories, rather than seeing the stories that have led up to this larger story. And also with having a catchy headline too, that often draws people's attention to read that story over others, like if it's something that is of interest, or I guess something that could like spark interest is when you're trying to like a juicy gossip story. So when you're trying to find out more information about one person, or say if it's like maybe not giving that person like a good light, if it's like, this person blew up on the media, like that could be like an example of maybe story placement, of having this larger story of, okay, this is like this celebrity blew up on the media, but you don't like read why and what led up to that. I'm trying to think if I want to say anything else with this to identify this type of bias. So another thing that you could look for with this, if a newspaper uses that story, this like large story as like the headlining story, that could maybe lead to you suspecting there is placement bias. But when viewing news articles, especially when you are like on a website like CNN, Fox News, or anything like that, if you notice like how they are placed together, that could, when you're reading it, think about, okay, did they place this in a way to highlight the story, you know, better and get more views, or do I need more information to understand the story? So bias by labeling. So there's two types of labeling. One in which one side of the political spectrum is given an extreme label, while the other side is not addressed with a label or given a more mild label. So you're obviously going to have more attention with that extreme label rather than the mild label, or not even with a label at all. So that is one type of it, where say like that extreme label could be either a negative label or a very positive label, and on the opposite, that other side may not even be addressed at all with a label. The other type is when one side is given a label and the other is identified as an expert or an independent group. So as you can see, it's kind of like that seesaw effect, where one side has a label, which is like, okay, you're trying to make it equal there because they both have labels, but calling that one group an expert or an independent group puts them higher up. So it's like that seesaw where you have one group being higher than the other. When looking for this type of bias, remember labeling in and of itself is not biased. It's when one side is labeled and another is not. So when you're looking through an article and you notice that, hey, this side has a label, this does not, this could lead you to think about, okay, is this labeling bias? And then bias by spin. So spinning is basically when a story only has one interpretation of an event or policy. It isn't evaluating something from both perspectives. So this could be probably with a lot of hot topics right now. So if you think about some of the things that are often put up to a debate, like say abortion laws, that kind of thing, or even an event, you could probably even consider coronavirus right now to be something where someone could include only one interpretation rather than both sides. But in this type of bias, the reporter gives subjective comments about objective facts. They could also make one ideological side look better than another. So basically, they're making, like we've said all along with the whole idea of bias, they're favoring one side over another. So they're going to write to make it look, one side look a lot better, and probably like bash the other. And then when identifying this type of bias, look for which perspective a news story matches. So if you notice that the story really matches liberal views throughout the whole thing, it's probably more of a liberal article. And then on the opposite side, if it has more Republican conservative views, it's probably from a Republican site. So in a way, this can lead you to think about, okay, how are they spinning the perspective on this certain event or policy that they're bringing up, and how could they level that out better. If the article doesn't seem level, that can be an indication of spinning. All right, and we are not going to do this today, but moving on to our example here. Let me move this down a little bit. This is where I want to be. Okay, so I was looking on Fox News today, and they actually have a site that says bias alert. So I looked on here, and I went ahead and looked at this December 10th article. New survey finds nearly half of conservative students heard anti-Trump rants from professors. So as you could see with that picture of the monkey, I can actually pull that up. So Fox News here is more left-sided, so they are more Republican, so they would be in favor of Trump, which is totally fine. Okay, so here's the actual article here, and I was looking here. So basically, it's talking about how campus reform, their reporter, Cabot Phillips, said that he was not surprised about a new survey that showed nearly half of conservative college students claim they've heard their professors rant against President Trump. I noticed here that a November survey from the College Fix showed 46% of conservative students said their professors have gone on tangents criticizing the president, 54% saying they have not heard such statements. So when seeing this source, the College Fix, I had no idea what that news source was. So I went ahead and searched what this was. And so the College Fix here, right under this description is what got me. So it's original, it's student reported, and it's your daily dose of right-minded news and commentary from across the nation. So when thinking about Fox News posting this under the bias alert, when Phillips was looking at this survey from the College Fix, they're going to mark that as bias alert because it's from a right-minded news source. Because, I mean, it says right here in the title, right-minded news. And so then they go on to say that, let me see here. No students have to between donates. So then Phillips basically goes on to say about his own experiences with campus reform, is saying that he's trying to bring light to the conservative side of this survey rather than making it more looking at both sides of the survey. So he is basically giving voice to those conservative students, saying that in his experiences, they're saying that people are afraid of retribution and unsure of what to do when their professor is raining against President Trump, raining against me for being conservative, letting everyone know how horrible conservatives' ideas are. Basically goes on to say no student should have to choose between feeling like their ideas or some evil thing. And you get the point there with what he's trying to bring up. And then he brings about this idea about liberal privilege. So liberal students having the privilege of professors that agree with their every idea and privilege of knowing if they don't speak up, it's not a problem because the professor will speak up and give their ideas for them. And he basically goes on to say, as you can see in this highlight, that's a privilege that conservative students don't have because they feel like in the college setting they are underrepresented just because of this issue. But when thinking about this, it is a type of bias because they're thinking that that survey is biased since it is right-minded. And so they're basically discussing how these results may be biased and how students who maybe align with more right-minded views are better represented than those within this survey that were aligned with more conservative. So with all of that in mind, I'm going to go back to this first presentation here. What I will have you do is go ahead under classwork. Let me see if it'll show up. Yep, it did. So answer the following question. Let me go back here. Why is understanding bias important when reading news articles or other media outlets like commercials or social media posts? After hearing everything I've said, why do you think it is important to understand bias? And that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoy your day, because it is gorgeous outside. And so I hope you guys get outside, maybe do something fun. Let me see if I can put this on full video. Okay, wait. There we go. You have a big view of me. But yeah, so the only thing I expect you guys to do today or by Sunday, April 12th, or if you have plans on Easter Sunday, which I get, it's a holiday, spend time with your family, and you get that to me by April 13th, that is totally fine. But I will post that in Classroom for you, as well as this video. And I will also post those to Google Slides presentation, so you have access to those. But other than that, I hope you guys have a great day. I'm going to end this really quick.